Measures in Article 41 are those not involving the use of armed force, are to be employed to give effect to its decisions, and it may call upon members of the United Nations to apply such measures. Originally, measures were thought to be sanctions, peacekeepers, invasion, not establishing a court of law. And that was the novelty of this whole thing that started with the Yugoslavia Tribunal. Let us now move to the Lebanon itself and what happened on the 14th of February 2005. On that day, Rafik Hariri, there he is, was assassinated. Rafik Hariri was a very close friend of Chirac, of Bush. There are the Hariri Towers in Chicago, some of you may know about. He had made a lot of money rebuilding Lebanon during the conflict. All the big construction projects handled by Rafik Hariri. A very wealthy businessman with contacts around the world, who, if he wanted to speak to a Western leader, it happened because he was so influential. He was influential with his money in Lebanon, and he was influential with his money outside Lebanon. Big controversy there for the French. He was assassinated. The next day, the President of the Security Council made a statement on the 15th of February. And the UN was requested to report urgently on the causes, circumstances, and consequences of this terrorist act. And the President of the Security Council called on the Lebanese government to bring to justice the perpetrators, organisers, and sponsors of this heinous terrorist act, and noting the Lebanese government's commitments in this regard. Council urges all states, in accordance with its resolutions, you see there 1373-201, that's the 9/11, to cooperate fully in the fight against terrorism. So within 24 hours, there was a statement by the President of the Security Council that had determined this was a terrorist act, that there were sponsors of this terrorist act, and wanting them brought to justice. Very surprising, I think, that opinions were made so early on as to what caused the death of Rafik Hariri. It was a massive car explosion, 1,000 kilos of TNT blew him up, and 19 other people were killed. But straight away, there is this idea that it was sponsored terrorism. I had lunch with the Syrian ambassador in July, and I said to him, you really must find out who briefed the President on that day of the Security Council, where this information came from, as it might be a trail as to why Syria was being looked at right at the start, because there has been no clarity about this investigation. Still no one's been put on trial, still no one's been charged, and you'll see the measures and steps that have been taken. But it was quite extraordinary how he came out with that right at the start, and it may be that there is a trail here as to where that briefing came from and what the sources of information were, which might be of use to defence in this case. The explosion was a massive explosion, as I've described, outside the St. George's Hotel in Beirut. Security Council were concerned about the territorial integrity of Lebanon being affected, issues we've seen that have been recurrent through the history of the Security Council, concerned about the destabilisation of Lebanon, what this would lead to, as we've seen, a recurring issue, and because of elections that were due in the following year, 2006, concern about the impact of the assassination on those elections. Hariri was very much the West's man, very much connected with the French and the US governments, and there was a feeling that this would have created a power vacuum within Lebanon, and great concern as to what effect that would have on the region. And you can see the issues from those Chapter 7 issues of the UN Charter, that they're concerned about regional security and maintaining peace. And this issue is all connected with that. Having requested a report from the UN Secretary General, a man called Fitzgerald, a policeman from Ireland, was given the task of setting up a UN fact-finding mission and providing within 1 month a report to the Secretary General Kofi Annan, so that he could brief the Security Council as to what was known about the assassination. At this stage, they're just looking at that assassination and no other related matters. Fitzgerald filed a report on the 24th of March, 30 days after his instruction, and in that 30 days he looked at the Lebanese police file. He found it in much disarray. He found that the crime scene itself had been quickly cleared up within a few days after the explosion. That the streets were back working around the George's Hotel in Beirut, and he was concerned about the inadequacy of the police investigation, and he believed that the measures being taken by the Lebanese were half-hearted and may even have been to conceal what had actually happened, so that it wasn't in fact being investigated by the Lebanese justice system. And he made a statement that in his observation of that month, that the Lebanese political structures had been so infiltrated by the Syrian intelligence services and Syrian politicians as to make the real control of the state of Lebanon to in fact be significantly in the hands of its neighbouring state, Syria. And that was something that he commented upon, and said that a UN independent investigation team should be established to carry out the investigation itself in relation to this assassination. And you can see there the exact quote from the report: acute polarization around the Syrian influence in Lebanon and the failure of Lebanese state to to provide adequate protection for its citizens, was his verdict on the police force at that time. And the hole, in fact, was quickly filled in, and valuable evidence apparently lost. Kofi Annan, reading that report, took a novel step and recommended the independent international investigation team as suggested by Fitzgerald. And this, for the first time, we've seen this morning how the UN has moved and developed its activities and its conduct. This was the first ever investigation team that the United Nations had ever decided to establish. And a highly significant movement. We've seen the departure of the UN from passing quite generalized resolutions through the Security Council to now having passed resolutions concerning terrorism, now getting into the investigation business. It had established its courts, now for the first time getting into the investigation business and wanting to find the answer to the assassination. A series of reports were issued and are still being issued every 6 months by the Independent Investigation Commission. And as it reported, its first commissioner was a man called Detlev Melis, who was a German policeman, and he had had experience of a terrorist case in Germany involving Lebanese and Syrians, and he was picked out as being the man to first of all lead the investigation. So Resolution 1595 of 2005 decided to establish, again through this legal structure of the Security Council, have the recommendation, then the Security Council passed the resolution, and that is the effect of a statute. And it passed this, decides, consistent with the letter, to establish the IIC based in Lebanon to assist the Lebanese Authority in their investigation of all aspects of this terrorist act, including to help identify perpetrators, sponsors, organisers and accomplices. All states called upon to cooperate, and these are significant articles, if you like, or sections of the resolution, because this gives the authority for the IIC, say, to come to London and request the transfer of documents from a suspect. And you may say, well, he's got no authority, he's not the police, he hasn't got a warrant. Oh, yes, he has. This international decision by the Security Council is something that is transmitted down the wire to all the states, to the Foreign Office, then the Internal Security or Home Office, Interior Ministry, and then when the International Investigation Commission comes to London or Tokyo, they're able to produce this to a magistrate and say, we want these documents, or give it to Scotland Yard and say, you must act upon this. You have a duty to cooperate, and you must, from this suspect, obtain his computer or his documents, because we want him investigated. So this has the effect of creating, in a very loose way, not what we're used to, a very loose way, ripples further down the line within states that they have a duty to cooperate with. First report filed by Melis in October 2005 and it was as a result of